Some of the trees from the February 2020 planting now have nuts in them. So it'll soon be time for the first harvest. Everywhere I look there are mushrooms growing around the trees, and what's interesting is it shows how much fungi is in the ground. It's surprising how quick the mushrooms pop up after I've mowed around the tree. We're heading over to start harvesting the nuts. I've started to notice that some of the trees where there were nuts, they're no longer there, so they've either hit the ground or an animal has taken them. So what I want to do is I want to keep a record of what trees are yielding, and they're the ones I want to propagate going forward. I'm not expecting a big yield, but I have noticed nuts on quite a few trees, at least over the last month, and hopefully there's still some left. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nuts. So having walked down the first row, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trees out of 26 that have nuts in them. You know, from 2 or 3 nuts to 7 or 8. One of the things that I have observed is trees that I know had nuts in them no longer have nuts on them. I checked them when the grass was overgrown, and even recently, and I think that the nuts have started to fall to the ground and they fell into long grasses, and either I chopped them up with the mowing machine or wildlife has taken them. So I think a big lesson is I need to have the grass heavily cut back around the trees at the end of September and keep it nice and clean in October, and it looks like the main harvesting window will commence around the first week of October if climatic conditions repeat next year as they were this year. But look, it's encouraging to see nuts starting to grow. These trees are, I think, 3 years old, and they're not expected to have any sort of meaningful yield until they're 5. And I'm really just looking for evidence that this is working, and it's nice to see nuts on them. Makes me happy. Yeah, and as I said before, I'm going through the trouble of trying to track yield at this point, just to establish good genetics, the ones I should be cloning going forward. It's now Sunday, the 10th of October. I finished going around the trees and harvesting the nuts I could find. So I've just gone through the different varieties. So I'm going to break down which variety yielded the best, and talk a little bit about the different varieties and lessons learned. So first up, I harvested about 300 grams of nuts from 28 trees. Now I know from going around the trees weeks ago that I saw nuts on trees that were no longer there, so I didn't get a full sample. So that means out of the 28 I collected, that's about 6% of what was planted last year. With regards to the varieties and how they performed, so Cosford had 16 Cosford trees had nuts on them, 9 Webbs had nuts on them, and 2 Nottingham and 1 Halls. And within that, so in total there was 59 nuts from Cosford, 34 nuts from Webbs, 9 nuts from Nottinghams and 4 from Halls. What's interesting to note is this is a nut from a Nottingham and this is a nut from a Cosford. So the Cosfords not only yielded more, but they produced the biggest nuts. So if I could get away with a monoculture, I would just plant Cosford based on the data I have right now, but it's too early to tell. The trees are going to mature at different rates and the trees are only about 3 years of age. So it's going to take more data to confirm what is the best variety for my conditions. But right now, by country mile, I would go with Cosford and Webbs. With the nuts now harvested, the next job is to dry them. So I suspect they have about 30% moisture content, and that has to be reduced to 8 to 10% moisture content. So I have 300 grams of nuts. That means I have to reduce it by say 22 grams per 100, so 66 grams down to 34 grams thereabouts. So I'm just going to bring them into the house. I'll leave them sitting beside a radiator to slowly dry over the coming weeks, and then we revisit with a taste test at some point. So I think the big lessons learnt this year was, come harvesting, I need to have the ground well cut back around the trees, probably by the 3rd week of September. So I'll probably need to start mowing at the end of August to get the long grass mulch down, and then get in with a strimmer or a mower of some sort to cut it back closely around the trees. There were some losses, but I suspect that was down to me not having the ground clear around the trees and not being able to see the nuts when they hit the ground. So overall, I am happy enough with the yield. So I'd say after you consider the losses, it was probably about 10% of what was planted last year, so it's going in the right direction. Clearly Cosfords are the big winner, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the coming years. So I'm now going to go and dry the nuts. I was just looking through the number of trees that I planted last year. So last year I planted 103 Cosfords, so 16% of them yielded. I planted 163 Webbs, so about 6% of them yielded, and I planted 183 Nottinghams and only 2% of them yielded. So everything's the wrong way around, but again, it's too early to tell. So yeah, Cosfords are winning by a country mile. They're at about 16% yield at 3 years of age, and it'll be interesting to see how the stats level up as the trees mature. Alright, that's going to take a few years to find out. So until next time, good luck.